So the next question, how do queens mate? Is the male on the top or is the male on the bottom? A lot of people thought that it had to be such as when they flew through the air, that the queen was on top and the male came up underneath, because when you look at the shape of those genitalia and how they come out and how they fit, they thought it would fit better with the drone underneath and the queen on top. But that wasn't correct, and we'll show you. Is a queen strong enough to carry the male? A lot of them figured that the queen couldn't carry that male, and so the male somehow would attach to the queen, and he would be responsible for keeping both of them flying through the air. But that was kind of a problem because the males became paralyzed in the act of the mating, so that didn't make sense. But no one really seemed to think about that. In what ways does a queen cooperate? Does a queen just passively fly through a drone congregating area, and then the males scramble with each other, and anyone that's lucky enough to mate with the queen mates with her? Or does she have some kind of control? Does she have to cooperate in some way in order for a mating to take place? How is the mating sign deposited? When we see it, we know it's there. We know the parts that make it up. But how does it get deposited? Another is, how does the mating sign get removed? Because, as I'll talk about eventually here, they found out a queen mates with many different males. But if every male is putting a mating sign in, that's a plug, how do the plugs get removed so the next male can mate? What chemical and visual signals are used for the mating? And I talked about the experiments that Norm Gary did just a minute ago about using the queen to provide the queen pheromone, and then using the corks to give the visual stimulus that was also attracting the males. I told you that Norm went and built towers just right away, about 500 meters away from the bee biology lab that was there. And he had 2 towers. He suspended cables between them. And that's where, for the first time, someone could really get a look at the mating behavior of queens. He also wanted to do this to take the queen out of the formula, figure out what's like the least common denominator of a queen. So he made dummy models that would be a model of a queen, so that he could then fool the drones into mating with this model. And doing that, he figured he could get a more precise understanding of the mechanisms of the mating without having the queen fighting off the drones, etc.
This special apparatus was designed to suspend tethered queens on a horizontal support line that can be adjusted to the correct altitude for maximum drone activity. Multiple queens may be displayed simultaneously in order to measure their relative attraction. Each queen produces a different amount of the attractive odors called pheromones. This sequence shows small groups of drones that dart away from the primary swarm. These groups are called drone comets because of their erratic transient grouping in a comet-like formation.
So this set of experiments was sort of the proof of principle. You could suspend queens in cages, and you could get drones attracted to them if you suspended them in the right places. These were these drone congregating areas were. And he was also able to look at the effects of temperature, wind speed. Wind speed affects how high those drones are flying in those drone congregating areas. So it gave a lot of information. But the next step was to use the dummies that he produced.
The boom truck enabled me to photograph drones from a position high above the swarm. At this elevation, I was able to get closer to the drones without apparently disturbing them. Now we are viewing the drones from above. This drone did not evert because the false sting chamber was too shallow. Movement of the dummy queens was necessary in order to increase drone attraction. If an artificial queen has the proper dimensions, drones evert in 1 to 3 seconds, then hang by the genitals. This close-up picture analyzes the stages of eversion. First, the drone makes contact with the dummy. Now the abdomen is beginning to curl under. Next, the abdomen contacts the dummy tip. This stage shows the beginning of eversion and paralysis, with the forelegs releasing their grasp on the dummy. Finally, eversion stops at this midway point, and the drone fails to eject from the dummy. Another drone mounts and everts into the queen dummy.
So the use of these dummy model queens was very good for a number of things. I mean, it shows how the drones mount. They're mounting on the top. They're not mounting from underneath. It showed many of the phases and the features of the mating behavior. But he had problems. You couldn't get the drones to fully evert. Couldn't get to the final stages of it because they just weren't somehow shaped right. He was able to get some matings with real queens that he would tether and suspend them, but it was very difficult to do it. One thing was that the drones were unable to mate with the tethered queens until he was able to take an O-ring and open up the sting chamber at the rear end of the queen that then allowed the drone to be able to evert his genitalia. In other words, his queens, when they were tethered, were not cooperating. And so that didn't work very well. But a German group, he was able to put together this overall picture of the actual mechanics of the mating behavior, which advanced our knowledge of the mating behavior a lot. But a German group, Gudrun Koeniger, was the leader of the group. They weren't really satisfied with that. They thought, okay, fine, but that's a little bit too unnormal, unnatural, because the queens are tethered. They're not in flight. So she rigged up a different kind of device. She built a tower, found a drone congregating area, built a tower, and at the top of the tower, she put an electric motor, and she put a rod on the electric motor that when the motor turned, the rod went around in a circle. And then out the end of that, she suspended tethered queens. And so now the queens were moving. And then on top of the tower, she suspended, or she anchored a video camera that was pointed at the queen. So as it went around, the video camera was recording it and was actually watching the behavior of the drones and the queens as they were flying or simulated flying through the air. This was done in the early 1970s. Norm Gary's work was done through the 60s. And here she gets some matings that look like they were probably close to being normal-like matings. So again, this advanced our understanding of the mating behavior and the mechanics of mating. But a few years ago, a nature filmmaker in Switzerland took on the challenge of actually doing some video recording of actual queens mating in a natural state. What I'm going to show you is absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe it when I first saw it. I thought that it had to be an animation, that it couldn't be real. And then I found out more about how he did it. He sent up swarms of robotic helicopters that had mounted on them very miniature high-speed, high-resolution cameras and flew these in drone congregating areas when queens, during the time of day when queens were going to get mated. And he was actually able to record actual, real, natural matings. Watch her open up her steam chamber when this drone gets close. She's cooperating. Right there, she opened. She's now supporting the drone's weight in flight. The drone becomes paralyzed. Once he everts, he falls back. The endophallus, the bulb of the endophallus breaks off, remains behind as the mating sign. He falls to the ground and dies. And this film, I think, really shows, it gives the answers to those questions about the mechanisms of the behavior. Backing up to 1930s, it was believed that queens mated with just one male. And there was good evidence for it. The queen came back with a mating sign. It looked like it could block any subsequent matings by additional males. When you counted the number of sperm that a male produces, it's about 5 million in an ejaculation. And that's about the same number that are stored in the spermatheca, the storage organ of a queen. So 5 million sperm by a male, 5 million of spermatheca, a plug that doesn't let others mate, it fits. But by 1932, there were doubts. W.J. Nolan, a researcher with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, reported that there are a growing number of reports coming in from beekeepers who raise queens that their queens were taking more than one mating flight and they're returning with a mating sign on each one of them. So at least some of them were mating more than once. Then William Roberts, another researcher for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, in one of his own studies, he reported that 55 out of 110 queens that he mated took 2 mating flights and returned with mating signs. So it looks like mating with at least 2 males is not unusual. In 1958, Tabor and Wendell, they're both also researchers for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they used genetic markers and were able to look at the offspring of a queen and assign them to more than one father. And then they used a mathematical model that yielded an estimate of number of matings of 7 to 10 males each. This is what I call the elephant in the room. In 1955, Jerzy Wojtka did what should have been done long before. He took queens that returned from mating flights and he dissected them. Now, when a queen returns from a mating flight, she has the sperm from the males that she mated with, stored in her lateral oviducts, shown here. These lateral oviducts are full of sperm. Okay, this is what got packed in from mating. This is the spermatheca. This is where the sperm gets stored, is in this organ here. So this sperm gets from these lateral oviducts into that organ there, the storage organ, after she returns from a mating flight. This is a figure of a partial. So here are the lateral oviducts here, and here is a partial filling in this one and this one. The sperm gets placed into the vaginal orifice and then gets pushed back and packed into these lateral oviducts when the queen is mating with the males. That explosive ejaculation pushes it back up into these oviducts. This one's full. When he dissected out these oviducts, he found that there was much, much, much more semen than is produced by a single male. In fact, there was enough sperm cells in these for 10 males. So that was the obvious experiment. They were coming back, obviously, with the loads of many males packed away in their oviducts. More recent estimates of the number of times that queens mate, based on genetic markers, suggest that even more than 20 males in some cases have mated with queens, 13 or more on single mating flights. The other thing we've learned is that the queens are in control. The queen must open the sting chamber for males to have access, and the queens can control how many mating flights they take and for how long. So they're in control of these matings and how many matings they have.